You'll notice an empty chair on the far side of the stage. This chair represents those artists around the world who have been robbed of their right to freedom of expression, who are prevented from practicing their craft openly or without fear of persecution, and who are unable to join us today. It is a reminder that the silencing of writers in one country robs the entire world of their voices. This particular chair is dedicated to one of the more than 60 writers, journalists, and bloggers who are behind bars today in Iran in violation of the free expression guarantees contained in the Iranian Constitution and international law. Last June, the world watched as the promise of a presidential election in Iran gave way to the most flagrant and merciless political repression, where peaceful demonstrations were crushed by brute force and hundreds of Iranians were rounded up and imprisoned, among them dozens of journalists and writers. Iran is now the world's leading jailer of journalists. During today's program, we'll be circulating a petition calling for the release of all of our colleagues in Iran. The petition is one of many actions of the Our Society Will Be a Free Society campaign, which PEN, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and an alliance of international press freedom and free expression organizations launched in February. Joel Simon of the Committee to Protect Journalists will say a few words about the campaign at the end of this program. Please sign the petition as it goes by. As PEN and CPJ have seen time and time again, your participation in our campaigns matters. In fact, it is thanks to this kind of international public pressure that Jason Jones will not be alone on stage today, sitting between two empty chairs. For PEN and for CPJ, it is a great pleasure to welcome journalist and documentary filmmaker Maziar Bahari today. After Maziar was released from Iran's notorious Evin Prison in October, he published an account of his 4-month ordeal in Newsweek magazine. It contained this scene. Maziar wrote, "I saw the flicker of a laptop monitor under my blindfold. Then I heard someone speaking. It was a recording of another prisoner's confession. 'It's not that one,' said the second interrogator. 'It's the one marked spy in the coffee shop.' Mr. Rosewater fumbled with the computer. The other men stepped in to change the DVD. And then I heard the voice of Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. Only a few weeks earlier, hundreds of foreign reporters had been allowed into the country in the run-up to the election. Among them was Jason Jones, a correspondent for Stewart's satirical news program. Jason interviewed me in a Tehran coffee shop, pretending to be a thick-skulled American. He dressed like some character out of a B-movie about mercenaries in the Middle East, with a checkered Palestinian keffiyeh around his neck and dark sunglasses. The quote-unquote interview was very short. Jason asked me why Iran was evil. I answered that Iran was not evil. I added that, as a matter of fact, Iran and America shared many enemies and interests in common. But the interrogators weren't interested in what I was saying. They were fixated on Jason. "Why is this American dressed like a spy, Mr. Bahari?" asked the new man. "He's pretending to be a spy. It's part of a comedy show," I answered. "Tell the truth," Mr. Rosewater shouted. "What is so funny about sitting in a coffee shop with a keffiyeh and sunglasses?" "It's not a joke. It's just a joke, nothing serious. It's stupid." I was getting worried. "I hope you're not suggesting he's a real spy." "Can you tell us why an American journalist pretending to be a spy has chosen you to interview?" asked the man with the creases. "We know from your contacts and background that you told them who to interview for their program." The other Iranians interviewed in Jason's report, a former vice president and a former foreign minister, had been arrested a week before me as part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard's sweeping crackdown. "It's just comedy," I said, feeling weak. "Do you think it's also funny that you say Iran and America have a lot in common?" Mr. Rosewater asked, declaring that he was losing patience with me. He took my left ear in his hand and started to squeeze it as if wringing out a lemon. Then he whispered into it, "This kind of behavior will not help you. Many people have rotted in this prison. You can be one of them." We are so happy that here today to continue the conversation that began in that coffee shop in Iran and to talk about what has been happening since then in that country. Will you please join me in welcoming Jason Jones and Maziar Bahari?
Already too much. I want to say first that today is my wife's birthday, Also, my daughter's ballet recital, and I skipped it to be here for Maziar Bahari, because that is what you have to do when you get somebody in prison. It's just what we have to do. Got to give up a lot. I had to put on a suit on a Sunday. And look what he shows up in.
Well, I didn't know that I had to dress up. I thought it's a writer's festival. So
Right. I'm not a writer, so.
you can dress however you want.
So let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Maziar. Tell the folks, does everyone basically know the story of Maziar? Yes.
Yeah.
For those who don't,
And if not, they should have done their homework.
that's right. You got to have a little context before you show up to this. Come on. So Maziar is a Canadian, Iranian-born, but a Canadian citizen, and a great writer. Works for Newsweek, and he. Tell them about yourself. Why am I telling them about it? You tell them about yourself.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I'm just Canadian. That defines me. But basically, the story is that I was arrested after the disputed elections last year, and I was in prison for 118 days, and then I was released because of the international campaign for me that was staged by my colleagues at Newsweek and other people in the media. And
So-
I'm here now
You were here. You were an international celebrity now
All right.
because of it. So let's.
because of you.
No, I'm not. I'm a nobody. Always will be a nobody. So let's tell people about pre-revolutionary Iran, not '79, but this current
This
revolution.
one, yeah.
What was it like?
Well, basically, what was happening in Iran, I just have to explain the situation a little bit, maybe give me about 5 minutes. What was happening in Iran is that since 1905, where Iranians started to rise against the monarch and had the first parliament in Asia, there was a gap between the educated, pro-Western, pro-democracy elite and the masses who were traditional, religious, and were not educated maybe, or they had religious education. And this gap was narrowing, and it resulted in the 1979 revolution against the Shah. And the Iranian people, they started to demand more rights from the government because they thought that rights such as freedom of expression, freedom of press, these are their rights. These are not the gifts that the government gives to them. But the Iranian government, which came out of a democratic revolution, regards people as part of the Ummah, which means the Muslim nation. And, and the government of Iran, the form of governance in Iran is Velayat Faqih, which means the governance of supreme jurisprudence, who is supposed to be like the Pope and is found by a council. And because of different reasons, mainly education and exposure to outside information from satellite television and the internet, this gap that I talked about between the elite and the masses, it was narrowing. And the government was scared of that because they knew that this narrowing of the gap will mean that people will demand more rights, and then there will be no place for a dictatorship in the country. So they were planning before the elections, without us knowing it. The supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, and the revolutionary guards, they were planning how to counter a potential uprising after the elections. But at the same time, many people in Iran, I'm not sure if they were the majority or not, but there were many people in urban areas and even in smaller towns in Iran, they were demanding their rights. And among the 4 candidates who ran for president, they chose Mir Hossein Mousavi, who was telling people what they wanted to hear, and he was promising them a civil society, more freedom of expression, rights as citizens. And they were ashamed. They had to endure 4 years of Ahmadinejad government, and they were ashamed of that. They did not like their president to deny the Holocaust. They didn't want the country to be an international pariah. So when Ahmadinejad manipulated many people in rural areas, mostly, and when I'm talking about rural areas, I'm including the outskirts of the cities, because whenever I say rural areas, people say, no, Ahmadinejad had many votes in cities as well. There are many people in Iran who live in the outskirts of the city who are migrants from villages, but they still have that rural mentality, and they are the most vulnerable. So Ahmadinejad managed to manipulate people in those areas by just distributing money as if there was no tomorrow, and by promising to continue giving money to them in the second term. So when Ahmadinejad, by manipulating people and by some vote rigging, got elected again, that elite who were pro-democracy, pro-Western, let's say, democratic values, they thought that, they cannot take that situation anymore. They couldn't tolerate it anymore. So they just exploded, and they came to the streets. But it was not an explosion as in 1979. It was not violent. I was in the streets of Tehran, and I'm sure that many of you have seen the footage that people were marching peacefully in the streets of Iran, and they had one question, which was, where is my vote? And that one question had this historical burden that, that meant, where are my rights as a citizen of this country? This was a question that was first raised in 1905 during the constitutional revolution in Iran. And then the regime had two choices. And by regime, I mainly mean Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, and the Revolutionary Guards. They had two choices. They could either listen to the voices of people and somehow accommodate many Iranians, again, I'm not saying the majority, but many Iranians who demonstrated against the regime, or they could go back to the bad old days and start to suppress people through violence. And that's what they did. And why I was arrested might be the...
Before we get to that, so when I was there, I was there maybe a week before the elections, and the feeling, what is it, Iran is 70% are under 30? Is that the? Yeah, 70% of the country is under 30. And I spent most of my time in Tehran, but you could see everywhere there was this movement afoot with youth wearing green armbands everywhere, just in really politically acting, saying, Mousavi, Mousavi, there's going to be change, we want change. The youth over there, they're looking for change. They don't, the women do not want to be, wearing hijab or chador. They want to be going to a nightclub. They want to be doing the same thing the 20-year-olds here are doing. And you can see the frustration there, but you also see that they wanted change. And that was really the thing that really caught my eye, that I was not expecting over there when I came.
Well, yeah, I think that in urban areas where it's true, and many Iranians, I'm still not sure whether vote rigging really happened or not, but because I haven't seen any documents about vote rigging, but I know that for a fact people were manipulated into voting for Ahmadinejad.
Oh, absolutely.
By getting
we talked.
I
forget where we were. We're in the middle of nowhere. We're looking for camels. We just wanted a shot of wild camels. Wasted an entire day looking for camels, and then we got there and they ran away from us. I don't know what we were expecting.
Scared of America.
They are. No, get out of here, infidel. He's going to ride us. We've seen what you do to camels in America. They
force us to smoke.
What's that?
Force us to
smoke. Yes. Our cousin Joe, he used to be a straight-living
nice
religious guy.
Yeah.
Now every time I see him, he's got a cigarette in his hand. Joe. Anyway, we were looking, we were asking, we were in this tiny village, and we asked people, we were like, who are you voting for? Are you pro-Mousavi? Are you pro-Ahmadinejad? And they were always with Ahmadinejad, because he said, he delivers for us. We're like, what did he deliver? He's like, water. We're like, what? He's like, yeah, it was like, people from his campaign came down, asked what they needed in their village. He said, we need water. We're dying out here. And he brought in truckloads and truckloads of water and promised that the water won't stop if you vote. And they were really, really, I think, tricked by this.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ahmadinejad's campaign cleverly tapped into a certain part of the Iranian population that was unknown to the reformists. And they were mainly the people in rural areas and mainly the people in the outskirts of the cities. Because any kind of change in Iran, any kind of change affects those people first.
Right, sure.
And they don't want change. So, but they were cynically exploiting people's fear. They were saying that, first of all, that Mousavi and his people, they are irreligious, that if they come to power, they're going to get rid of religion in Iran, and you will see people with loose clothing walking around, the women, without hijab, where we're going to walk around the city.
Sounds like the Iranian Tea Party.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Actually, I think that maybe they even took notes from Karl Rove's election campaign and election management. But yeah, I mean, but they did, actually, they did a good job studying Karl Rove. And they were also exploiting people's economic fears, that they were saying, if any change happens, they're going to shut down Imam Khomeini's charity foundation, which has 1 million families under its protection. And 1 million family among the social classes that Imam Khomeini Charity Foundation protects means about maybe 7 million people, 7 to 10 million people. And they said that they're going to cut the subsidies, and they're not going to make these roads that Ahmadinejad has made. And they created that fear among the people, and I think that was the main reason that Ahmadinejad got reelected. I don't think that much vote rigging happened. I mean, I have no idea whether vote rigging happened or not, but that's what they were doing.
So Ahmadinejad, I think a lot of people compare him to Bush.
I did.
Yes, I know. I remember that. The Iranian Bush. Is he a dumb guy? What is this? Is he? I think a lot of people think he's just a puppet of the Ayatollah.
You see, he's not a dumb guy. He
says a lot of dumb things.
He says a lot of dumb things. I mean, the problem is that, I mean, he has street smart. He knows how to protect his interest when he sees an opportunity. And he's always used, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people. I did a documentary about him, and I talked to a lot of people who knew him from his childhood, that he was always the underdog, and he always used that underdog situation in his favor. So during the 2005 presidential campaign, no one took him seriously. I remember that Ahmadinejad's people, they were asking us, journalists, to come and interview him. We didn't think that he had a chance to win the elections, and we always said no. So he's used that underdog's position, first of all, to get elected by presenting himself as someone outside of the system, outside of a corrupt system, and also he's used that position in order to be the puppet of the supreme leader and the Revolutionary Guards. So right now in Iran, we have this triangle of power, which is the supreme leader, the Revolutionary Guards, and Ahmadinejad, and they each empower each other.
Right.
And the Revolutionary Guards, because they have the most money and they have the most guns, they are the most powerful now, but they cannot survive without the religious legitimacy of the supreme leader or the popular legitimacy of Ahmadinejad. And I'm not sure how long this situation is going to last. Ahmadinejad has shown that he's quiet, good in terms of manipulating.
I remember when I was there, they had not yet endorsed, or the supreme leader had not yet endorsed one of the four candidates, and it was like, no, he's mad at Ahmadinejad for talking to the Western press, and but then there was this one big celebration. I think it was the death of Khomeini. They were celebrating, and he came out and kissed the ring, and
Yeah, well,
Sad beside him.
basically, I mean, a lot of people had, they were wishful thinking that, they thought Khamenei, as a pragmatic politician, should support someone a little bit less divisive and little bit more logical than Ahmadinejad in order to survive, in order to protect his own interest in the long run. And I remember after the election when he congratulated Ahmadinejad after maybe 1 hour or so after they announced the results, you could see that people were really disappointed in Khamenei.
Right.
They thought that they were betrayed by Khamenei, and they also thought that Khamenei had betrayed himself. So much of the anger, much of the frustration that people expressed on the streets came from being disappointed in Khamenei as
Right.
the supreme leader, as the king, because, I mean, I don't think that, the monarchy has finished in Iran. I think this regime is the continuation of the Shah's government and the Shah's dictatorship. It's just that the king has changed. Like Khamenei has all the powers of the Shah and even more.
He just doesn't throw as many sex parties as the Shah did.
Well, we don't know. Yeah.
Speaking of which, if you ever go to Iran and get behind closed doors, whoo, girls are crazy. I was with a mother and she was crazy. Her 3 kids and she was dancing for me. It was a long story, but
You didn't
they're
film
pent
it,
up.
though.
They're pent up. They got to express somehow.
Yeah.
They can't drink. They can't hold hands in public. It's tough. It's tough being a youth
but they
over there.
can do everything in private.
Yes, I know. I know.
And they do.
I saw with cameras rolling.
Yeah.
So I show up, let's say a week, 2 weeks before the elections, and Maziar here was very helpful to us, arranging a lot of interviews. We kind of went over there a little green, a little naive, and we met with Maziar in a hotel, and he gave us 7 or 8 different people to talk to, and one by one, after we left and our pieces started airing and the revolution had started, one by one, all of those people started being arrested. It was first the former vice president of Iran, then the former foreign minister of Iran, and then we found out Maziar was arrested. And what did we do wrong?
Well, I don't think that you didn't do anything wrong and I didn't do anything wrong. It's just that while I was meeting you and I was meeting other journalists like you, and I was doing a BBC documentary when Jason and his producer Tim Greenberg came to Iran, and I just came down to the lobby all the time.
Because he was Jewish, is that why?
Yeah, I just came down to the lobby, and I have to tell you something about the Jewish thing. Remind me of the Chekhov story.
Oh yes, all right, we'll get that. Yeah.
We get to that later. But I was talking to people, and I was being followed. I was being, now that I'm researching a little bit into what I was doing, I was being followed, and what the scenario was that the Revolutionary Guards, they were trying to connect the reformists in Iran with the foreigners. And in this scenario, they needed 3 people. One person who would connect the West to the reformists through NGOs, another person diplomatically, and someone else as a media connection. And I was supposed to be the media connection. And I was doing everything that a media mastermind would do. People would come to my hotel, I would go there, I would have tea with them and tell them, okay, why don't you interview this person, that person? So what is your program? You want to do something about culture? Well, I know a rapper, why don't you, contact him? And, Jason rapped with a friend of mine. And, I was doing
Very
all
well,
that.
very well. I don't know if you've heard me rap, but
Oh, it's excellent. You should see it online. And yeah, so, and you guys, you were doing your job. Other journalists, they were doing their jobs. It's just that the Revolutionary Guards, who are very paranoid, who are very isolated, and they somehow feel threatened by the presence of almost 200,000 American troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. They thought that they are, that they have to do something. And they were preparing themselves, they were preparing this scenario for what would happen after the elections.
Right. I mean, that's interesting you say that, because I never thought of that as a Canadian American now, but you know, Iran's paranoia of just completely being surrounded by American troops, you know, and the Zionists, like they really feel threatened from this giant military presence
Yeah,
in the
you
Middle East.
know, an Iranian intelligence officer made a very good analogy, and he said that imagine we had 200,000 troops in Canada and Mexico. Wouldn't the government of the United States be paranoid? Well, it is something to think about, especially.
Not if they were Canadian and Mexico troops.
No, but
Come on, Canadians, come on. What are you, and the Mexicans? What are, please.
yeah. Yeah, with all the mariachi.
Exactly, yeah. That's
But-
racist, sir. I'd expect better from an Iranian.
Well, I didn't talk about the Mounties, though.
Who are, the Iranians actually, did you find the Iranians, funny thing about racism, but do you find Iranians are a little racist? Yeah. I found a little bit of racism there, which is weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, whenever you don't know anything about others, you become racist. And, you know, and whenever
Right.
people manipulate your fears in order for political advantage or economic advantage, you become racist. So a lot of Iranians, even here, I was talking to a relative of mine a few months ago, and she lives in Toronto. And I said, and she moved the house, and I said, so how's the new neighborhood? And she said, oh, it's an excellent neighborhood. We don't have any foreigners in the neighborhood. There are no Indians or.
Of course not. Indians.
Indians or blacks. So, but yeah, and you know, there's racism in Iran, of course, against the Afghans. But in general, I don't think racism is something that's, you know, inherent in the Iranian culture.
It doesn't seem acted upon. It seems maybe spoken, but it doesn't seem.
It's spoken, yeah. And you know, like Jews, Jewish people in Iran, they've lived in Iran since the time of Cyrus the Great, and you know, 2,500
Right.
years ago, when they were driven out of Babylon, and they live peacefully with people. And sometimes there are certain things happen, you know, clashes happen,
Right.
because someone wants to manipulate. But anti-Semitism, like in Europe, in Eastern Europe, in Western Europe, never existed in Iran like that. But also because Iranians, since the beginning, they are used to different nationalities living in the same land.
They're Persian. They're not Arabic. You call a Persian an Arab. They get a little upset.
Yeah. But there are other nationalities in Iran as well. You know, there are Turks, there are Arabs,
Right.
there are, you know, Azeris, and you know, and people live peacefully. But that's the worst. I mean, that's the problem with this government, that they want to basically Islamicize the country. And you know, it's been a failed experience since 30 years ago. But they keep on insisting making the same mistake, that you know, they can create this perfect. I mean, they're good ones. They're good people who are ideological and not corrupt, because I think that in this government there are three different kinds. Some of them are ideological, and they believe in creating a perfect Islamic society regardless of the realities in the world. There are other cynical, corrupt people, many of them among the revolutionary guards, who are just trying to save as much money as possible and buy houses in Dubai, Canada, Malaysia, whatever. And there are others who are both ideological and corrupt, and those are the worst kinds.
Right.
And, yeah. And unfortunately, I was a prisoner of their ideological ones.
Right.
And it was very difficult, as you said, like, because of their paranoia, they really believed in their lies. And they really believed that if someone talks to the foreign media, if someone has lived in the West for a long time, and if someone they cannot understand, there must be something dodgy with that person.
Right.
And as a result, you know, they put me under a lot of pressure in order to confess that I was, first, that I was the mastermind of the Western media.
Of course you were.
No, I just masterminded you, not the whole media.
Well, I'm CIA, so.
So it was not even a media.
So,
And yeah, then they accused me of.
so let's
Yeah.
if people aren't familiar
Yeah.
with what happened exactly. The massive protests were in the streets.
Yeah.
All the Western press was kicked out. Were you uploading? Were you
I
filming?
kept on reporting, yeah. I mean, I kept on reporting for Newsweek website, and I was filming and sending the footage outside, yeah,
Right.
for Channel 4 mainly.
Which was strictly prohibited at the time.
Yeah.
Enforced by Revolutionary Guard.
Enforced by
besieged.
Revolutionary Guards, yeah. And the Revolutionary Guards, they sent a message to the Ministry of Culture where journalists have to get their accreditation from, and
Right.
they said that no journalist should report on these events. But, you know, I was a journalist, and I thought, you know, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to
course.
report on something. So I continued to work.
And so so how many days was it before you were
9 days after the election.
the election? So 9 days.
I was arrested on June 21st. The election was on June 12th.
Middle of the night.
No, in the morning.
Middle of the morning. You were,
Beginning of the morning. 7:45.
which is the end of the night.
Beginning of the morning, yeah.
People came in. They bust down your door. Or they knocked nicely.
Well, I don't know how did they enter. I was asleep, and you know my mother.
Middle of the night, of course, you would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
My mother woke me up, and apparently they said that they had something. They had a letter for her, and then they forced themselves in. And my mother came.
Why would they need a letter? Like, that seems like a ridiculous excuse. Why would they? And then they forced them. So why wouldn't they just force themselves to start?
Well, you know, the funny thing is that they have a very, very strange code of etiquette because
You
they
think?
came.
We have a letter for you. Go for the fucking door!
Exactly, yeah. No, I mean, they came to my mother's house where I was staying, and I was between apartments. So there was, my mother's house had 3 bedrooms, and all my tapes and books and everything, they were in boxes in one of the rooms, and they went through everything. And, you know, they made a mess of the whole situation. They basically went through everything that my mother had. And
They were like TV cops.
yeah, exactly. And then my mother asked them, my mother saw it was summer, so my mother saw that they were sweating, and she said, would you like to have a tissue, you know, to clean your sweat? And they said, oh, no, thank you, madam. We don't want to impose, you know. And my mother was like, well, you've come to, you know, you have woken me up early in the morning, and, you know, you're going through everything, you're making a mess.
The least you can do is not sweat on my stuff. Dab your forehead,
Yeah,
sir.
exactly. And yeah, so, yeah. And the reason I'm calling my interrogator Rosewater is that because that's, I don't know if you noticed it or not, that's a very typical smell of many
I
Iranian
noticed it.
officials. Yeah, you know, that they smell of sweat and rosewater.
It's a
They
delightful
sweat a lot.
combination.
Yeah, exactly.
If you ever get a chance to go.
And feet, yeah, feet and rosewater. So that was the.
That was actually the smell. Just to
So
press for a second.
I think I smelled the guys who came to the house before I opened my eyes and I saw them.
Right. And you saw Rosewater's face?
I saw Rosewater's face. Yeah, he came to arrest me.
But that was the only time.
No. I saw him the last night before I left
Oh, you
as
did?
well. You know, one thing that they're doing, which is very smart, is that it is not as if that it's the system that's arresting you. It's as if there's one person who is arresting you. He has a personal grudge against you. He is in charge of your life. He's the one who can liberate you. He's the one who is imprisoning you. He can beat you up. He can be nice to you while in prison.
He's
So-
got carte blanche to do whatever he wants.
I don't think so. I think that his bosses are telling him what to do, because sometimes I could see that his strategy was changing, but he had to adjust to the new strategy. I'm not sure whether it was because of the budgetary reasons that he had to play good cop and bad cop at the same time, or it was part of the strategy. But anyways, he was the good cop.
I think
and
I've
the
seen
bad
that sketch
cop.
on Mad TV.
Yeah, so he had to, he was in charge of my life, basically. And that's the first time, yeah, I saw his face. And, you know, they confiscated a lot of my tapes. And
So they took you away
books.
that morning?
That morning, yeah, exactly.
Right. In what was it, just SUVs or motorcade, just a car?
There were like there were like 6 normal looking Peugeot cars.
Okay.
And yeah. And it was, I mean, whatever they were confiscating, it was at random. They were really trying hard to confiscate pornos. And because I didn't have any pornos, but I had some.
Sure you
yeah.
didn't.
Well,
You just hid them well.
yeah, exactly. It was on my hard disk.
Staying with
yeah.
your mother, you gotta hide it. Yeah.
And I had it at the neighbor's house. But the funny thing was that whenever he saw the words P, O, and R in a sentence or in a title, he was wondering whether that was a porno or not. And I had the whole series of Sopranos films, and he was like,
Nice.
"Is that the porno?" I said, "No, it's soprano."
Is that a high singing voice porno? What is that?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming they took your box set of Porky's as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great Canadian movies if you haven't seen them.
So yeah, and they took me to Evin Prison.
They took you to Evin first? I heard you were you transferred to Evin?
No.
You went straight to Evin.
I went straight to Evin. They didn't tell me where they were taking me, but
Did you know?
I could guess because the way we took, you know, before they put the blindfold on me, I could see that we were heading towards Evin. And
So again,
climate.
they drove you for a bit, then put a blindfold on you.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
It's just bizarre, you know.
They haven't learned police work.
Yeah, you know, I have no a clue, but what are their, you know, codes of etiquette? It's just, you know, it's very much like, you know, Kafka's The Trial, and you know, everything that they do, it seems that they have a reason, but at the same time, it's so irrational. So their irrationality is their reason.
Right.
So, and even now, I've somehow given up on thinking about what were the reasons to arrest me, to beat me up at some point, and then be nice to me, and so it's just yeah.
So you went straight to Evin Prison, which is a notoriously horrendous place.
Yeah.
And political prisoners mostly there, or because it doesn't seem
There are lots of political prisoners. It's a big complex. I mean, you can see it on Google Earth. It's a big complex, and there are some.
It didn't seem to me like there was a lot of like petty crime going on in Iran when I was there.
No, I mean, you see, there are the main 3 categories of prisoners in Iran. The first ones are the drug dealers.
Okay.
And they compose maybe 60% of the prison population. And then the second group are the people who signed bounce checks.
What?
Yeah, so there are many people because of bounce checks in Iran and in prison in Iran. And then the third are the political prisoners.
Wow.
Yeah, so there are more people, drug dealers and bounce checks.
This-
It's not political prisoners still. Yeah.
That
But
sounds-
the political prisoners are catching up.
Right.
They're really trying hard to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take people through your ordeal there, if you.
So
want.
basically, yeah, what happened was that in the beginning of the interrogation, they told me that I was the mastermind of the Western media, and they had been following me for I think about 2 months since I went back to Iran in around mid-April 2009, and they were telling me about these meetings that I had with different journalists, and one specific dinner that I had at a friend's house who was the correspondent for New York Times. And one day, as Larry read the Newsweek piece, they said that, you know, we have a fresh evidence that, you know, you have met this spy. And, you know, when they showed me the footage that, you know, with
So you said we have evidence you've met a spy.
Yeah, you've met a spy. And they took it seriously because
Was there a little bit of back and forth just to play you out before they put the damning evidence into
they said, well, we have fresh, it was That day, in the beginning, I think 3 or 4 times, Rosewater came with someone else in the room. And that day, they said that we have evidence against you that you are a spy. And they showed me that footage. And they couldn't understand that, if someone says he's a spy, if he sounds like a spy, if he looks like a spy, it's a good thing we don't eat him, but it's he must be a spy. So
No,
they think that he's a
they're
spy.
not stupid people over there. They're maybe a little uneducated.
Yeah, the thing is that what is the stupid?
We have a laugh track on our show. Like you can hear the studio audience laughing when I'm making ridiculous, dumb jokes.
But the thing is that whenever you are isolated and uneducated, I'm not talking about not having a high school diploma or a BA or whatever. I'm talking about not knowing about the other people, about what's going on outside of your country. Or even worse than that, if you have a very wrong view of what is going on outside of your country. I think that in itself makes you stupid and makes you say stupid things, even though you may have high IQ. Like Ahmadinejad apparently has a high IQ. He's a very good engineer, or there's a very tough entrance examination to university in Iran, and he had a very good mark in that.
It's an Iranian test, though, so much easier.
But yeah, but he's stupid. He's stupid because he's ignorant and because he doesn't know. So,
but no one there, like there was not one guy who had maybe seen a comedy show in his past.
No, I don't think so.
That went,
no,
hey
no.
guys, instead of thinking this is an actual spy, maybe, or to use the internet and go, who is this guy whose name comes up on a chyron? Oh, he's a jackass from Canada who is on a comedy show.
They didn't know who you were. I think that because they were following me.
But they have Google. I mean,
Well, no, I think that someone sent them the footage. I don't know what happened exactly, but I think that someone maybe sent them the footage, and they thought that they had fresh evidence. They didn't know what the show was. They didn't know anything. So they just received the footage, and they thought that they had incriminating. But more than your appearance in the show, they were angry about the fact that I talked about many common values that Iran and America shared, and things that Iran and America had in common. And they were saying that by saying that, you want to create an Americanized country in Iran and government in Iran. And for some reason, again, I don't know, because of ignorance, my interrogator was fascinated with New Jersey. So he was telling me that you want to...
He thought that was the ultimate American
Exactly,
place.
that was the ultimate...
everybody who's American, who's anybody, goes to New Jersey.
Exactly, New Jersey. And he said that you want to create a New Jersey Islam in Iran with naked women and Michael Jackson music. So, but it was just like that, it was going from...
Just for the record, I would hate to go to that strip club.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson's Thriller playing while Jersey chicks strip.
Exactly, it's like Bada Bing with Michael Jackson music. But, it was just so bizarre, to have, this mixture of Bon Jovi and CIA, Atlantic City with... CIA spies. It's just.
Had he seen pictures of Atlantic City?
I think he just had a fascination with the name, and he thought that he had a lot of. I mean, I'm talking about ignorance, and I think stupidity comes out of ignorance. And he had a lot of. He didn't know a lot about the West, and again, worse than that was that he had all these really wrong, misleading views about the West. That once he asked me, he was fascinated with sex, of course, and he went through all my Facebook contacts and my email contacts, and he asked me if I had sex with each of the women in my.
Which you said yes, of course.
And I said, yeah, of course. And it was, and some of them. were like 70-year-old human rights lawyers and, you know, Nobel laureate Shirin Ebadi, because he said that you have 3 phone numbers for Shirin Ebadi, so you must have had sex with her. Anyways, he once asked me, you're talking about values in the West. You mean that I cannot just go to Champs-Élysées Street? And he loved to say Champs-Élysées. You know, he thought that,
To be fair, it's fun to say.
Yeah. No, but I think that he thought that Champs-Élysées was the second coolest place in the world, right after New Jersey, you know.
Did he say what part? Like is it Paramus or Hoboken?
I think it was Hoboken, yeah. So you have Hoboken and then you have Champs-Élysées, yeah. So he said that, you mean that I cannot just go to Champs-Élysées and grab anyone's hand and have sex with them? I said, no, you cannot. You can get arrested. Who would arrest me? I said, well, the police. The woman calls the police and they're going to arrest you. But everything that they asked me a question about, it was coming from this ignorance, because I was innocent. They were trying to force me to confess to things. And you know, some of it was quite horrible. Like, he was trying to force me to confess to be in contact with 3 different people, Mousavi, Khatami, and Rafsanjani, the former. And you know, he was beating me one day and he said, so why don't you just write down something, you know? They are in their houses and you know, they are having fun. I get overtime, you know, I can be here as long as I want and I get overtime. It's just you who is suffering here. Just write something and confess and, you know, you'll be out of here. And, you know, it was just that cynical, and a lot of things that they tried to charge me with came out of this mixture of ignorance and malice. Like, I can tell you the Chekhov story right now, that I'm a member of 2 fan clubs on Facebook, Pauly Shore and Chekhov. Well, don't ask me why. I may be the only person who's been.
I don't know if you've seen Pauly Shore in the Cherry Orchard.
Exactly. Yeah. He played one of the Uncle Vanya. Yeah. And anyways, he asked me about Pauly Shore, and it was after the interrogation about you. And he said, "So who is Pauly Shore?" I said, "Pauly Shore is a comedian." Wow. Everyone you know seems to be a comedian. We're going to investigate. And I'd love to know the result of their investigation. What happened to Pauly Shore? I haven't heard.
He's in some biodome now, I think.
All right, okay. And then...
weapons of mass destruction.
All right.
Yeah.
And then he asked me about Anton Chekhov, and it is a literary festival. I think it's interesting for the audience. He said, who's Anton Chekhov? I said, he's a Russian playwright from late 19th century, early. What did he write about? I said, well, you know, existential stories, people's problems. It happened in dachas outside of, you know, Moscow, St. Petersburg. And he said, was he a Jew? I said, I don't know. There were lots of Russian intellectuals at that time who were Jews, but I don't think that Anton Chekhov was Jewish. I don't know. I may be wrong. And then he said, no, he sounds like a Zionist to me. I'm going to investigate. And I think that they really investigated, because after that...
They did one quick search?
No, they didn't. They didn't ask me about any of my friends whose surname finished with Of. And I have a friend whose surname is Shemtov. Mm-hmm. He's Israeli.
Okay.
And, you know, I thought, you know, Shemtov, I thought, is the most Jewish and most Israeli name that you can find. And, you know, they didn't even ask me about Shemtov, because I could just see them that, you know, gathering in a room and say that, well, Chekhov, Shemtov, whatever. You know, they're all the same. So we're not going to bother with any offs anymore. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm being told we have to move to a quick question and answer period. So anyone have any, is there a place to come down to have a microphone, or I think you have to go to the microphone because it's being recorded, I believe. The Revolutionary Guard is recording all of this.
You will be Googled.
Is the microphone on? Anyone?
I think we can hear you. We can hear you, yeah.
Yes, we applied. In fact, Iran, the piece had been in the mix for about a year. Like, we actually wanted to go under the Bush administration, and it, for whatever reason, just fell through. But the Iranians opened their doors. They were like, "Come on in, yeah, sure," because they thought we were journalists. And it was actually the State Department here that were holding up things. And when we went, we were not allowed to bring anything with us, no computers, like we did everything old school, we handwritten notes. And, but yeah, we went as journalists. I got on my desk, actually, I have an Iranian journalist card. It says, there's no journalist for some scary reason. And the very first thing we did, I got off the plane, we met our fixer, and he brought us to an Ahmadinejad rally, and I was, 10 feet away from him for no apparent reason. And because of my journalist card.
And they weren't just trying to use you to try to make Ahmadinejad look good? That's what I was curious.
Well,
It's like they can't.
I showed up in the same members only jacket he always wears. So I think they knew immediately I wasn't there to make him look good. We had this joke where I planned to walk in and go like, "Oh, come on! I called you and said I was wearing mine." But one of the guys was like, "Take the jacket off. We know what you're up to, jackass."
But I think that, as we were talking about, like, ignorance permeates through the whole system. So I don't think that even the guy here in the UN who gave you the visa, when he knows about the Daily Show, and he just maybe listens to or watches certain programs, maybe the networks, but
well, they know it's in the, they know it's floating out there, and they should know it. It feels important or whatever, but they don't really know we're there to make.
And also, it took them by surprise. The demonstrations after the elections took everyone by surprise, of course, but especially the government, because they thought that they can invite all the journalists to Iran in order to show Iranian democracy in action.
When we were leaving, I passed. Like, Christiane Amanpour was coming in at the airport, and I was like, "Hey, have fun."
Everyone was coming in,
Bill Keller, who I just interviewed for a New York Times piece, and maybe made him look a little silly, but not a lot. Passed and was like, "Hey," I was like, "Oh Christ, you're here too?" Come on. And then they all got thrown out.
They all got kicked out a couple of days after.
And the weird thing, we were one of the only quote unquote news organizations who had any sort of context to Iran. Like, no one went there early. And I was interviewed by CNN. They were like, "How did you know to go there?" I'm like, "I got a calendar. I found out when their election was, and I went there a couple days early and did some reporting, like you guys should have been."
A calendar and a travel agent. That's all.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
By the way, Jon Stewart, world's worst travel agent. Economy to Iran. Come on. Any other questions?
There is one.
Oh.
Okay. Is this thing on? Hi.
There you go.
Okay. I think here in the States that we just sort of instinctively assume that people in Iran hate the current clerical regime and want to see the end of them. But Americans are notorious for failing to understand what people in other countries really want. So my question is, do people in Iran hate the current regime and want them to go? And if they do, considering that there was not a revolution after the past election, is that a thing that's possible?
But I don't think that all Iranian people hate the current regime and want to go, otherwise it wouldn't be in power. I think that this government, by which I mean the Supreme Leader and the Revolutionary Guards, still have the biggest support among different groups in Iran. They may not be the majority of the Iranian people, but they have at least 5 or 6 million people in Iran. But also you have to see that it doesn't matter whether people like the government or not, because most of the people in all countries in the world, they're silent. They're the silent majority. And this silent majority do not want change. Usually people do not want change, especially in a country like Iran that has been through so much turbulence, a war, a revolution, so many different upheavals in the past 30 years. So people want to have that peace and security as much as possible. And because of that, many people do not take action against this government. They will take action, I think, eventually. I think the process started after the June elections last year. And I think this process will come into fruition. I don't know when. Just imagine that Khrushchev came to power in 1954 after a year Stalin died, and the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. So it's going to take time. I'm not sure if it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, whatever. The situation will change, and the silent majority will speak. But at this moment, it's very difficult to say that most Iranians hate this current regime. And I know that doesn't make me very popular among the Iranians in the diaspora, because people love to hear that everyone hates the Iranian regime, but that's not true.
I think, to me, it seemed a little like our 2004 election, where, both coasts, it seemed, were just enraged with the Bush administration, and we're like, oh, there's no way this guy's getting elected again. Yeah. And then election night, you're like, what? What the hell happened here? Why is this another 4 years of this jackass? And it's just, people are, in this country, I go all over the place, and people really do hate change. They really hate it. And, it took 8 years of whatever that was to get to a place where you get a competent leader, handling the country.
Yeah, and especially when you see so much change in the country that, when the reformists came to power in 1997, they changed all the provincial governors. They changed all the mayors. And that affects people, that affects people psychologically, economically, culturally even. And when Ahmadinejad came to power in 2005, the same thing happened. People just don't want change. Most people, they just want to have a normal life. They just want to go home, be with their families. And that sector of population, which is the majority of the population in Iran, they have not been touched by this government. But this government is just shooting itself in the foot. And they are even provoking those people. They're talking about the Chinese model in Iran right now. But in China, if you cannot express yourself politically, at least you can go to a nightclub. At least you can invest and be a capitalist. In Iran, they're even denying people of those economic and social freedoms as well. And that will, I think, will have tragic results both for the government and for the country.
Go ahead.
Hi. I feel like the Western media, and including Newsweek and The Daily Show, does a very poor job of giving context about the U.S. and the West's role in creating the current situation in Iran. And you guys spoke about well, I guess there's this narrative about Ahmadinejad being this crazy, violent leader, and then there being a lot of kind of ignorant, paranoid people in Iran who are getting manipulated. And I don't think it's only paranoia. I think that people have. I think that there's some well-founded fear when of the West's influence when you look at the fact that we overthrew a popular democracy there in the 50s and propped up a brutal dictator who served our interests for 25 years after that, and supported Saddam Hussein when he was using biological warfare against Iran in the 80s. And then as you guys mentioned, there are the 200,000 troops right next to Iran, and if Bush could have, I think he would have loved to invade Iran also. So I'm like, I don't want Iran to go nuclear, and I don't think that would make the world a safer place. But I think that the way things get reported, Americans a lot of times feel like that's just warmongering on the part of Iran, and don't recognize that there are legitimate fears and grievances. So I was wondering if you guys agree with that and have any ideas about how the Western media could do a better job of providing that context.
I think what we're saying is the information's out there. It is the individual's responsibility, I think, to go find it. If you're just watching Fox News, 24/7, you're not going to find it, obviously, because they're not going to talk about that, because they're not in that business. They're not in the business of educating you. They're in the business of sound bites and entertainment, yelling at each other. But the information's out there, I mean, when we started searching for Iran, we were amazed at how many mainstream media outlets actually had done really in-depth stories of Iran, and how many documentaries are out there. Like, it's all out there. You just have to find it.
Yeah. And speaking of the coup, I have done a long documentary that will be shown on the BBC in August. So watch out for that. That's that is the program that, that's an event. I mean, I think there is a certain degree of truth in what you're saying, but I think a lot of information is there. And of course, a lot of people, Newsweek or The Daily Show, they cannot go through all the events that you mentioned. So, yeah.
We're being told we have to wrap it up, so I apologize to. Yeah, unfortunately, there's another event, I guess, coming in that's more important. I suggest getting tickets to that.
Thanks so much. I'm Joel Simon, by the way, and my job is just really to say thank you very much. I'm the executive director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and we're really thrilled to co-sponsor this event with PEN. And really what I want to say, just to conclude, is Maziar is here because people around the world spoke out about his incarceration. And while the Iranian government is schizophrenic and paranoid and hard to predict, there are elements within the government, certainly within the regime, that care very much about what the rest of the world thinks about them. And so it's just vitally important. I want to re-emphasize what Larry said, that all of you are here. You're here because you're engaged by these issues, that you continue to speak out, that you sign the petition, that you continue to track events, and that you let the Iranian government know that the many, many journalists who are in jail, writers, bloggers, people who've expressed their ideas remain in jail, and we can't forget them, and we have to speak out about them. And I want to commend Maziar, who has become a spokesperson on behalf of all those people, and who has, in every event that he's done, in all his work, continued to remind the world that so many people, so many journalists who don't have his international profile are still behind bars in Iran, and we can make a difference by speaking out about their incarceration. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Maziar. Thank you, Jason. Thank you to Jason's wife and daughter for giving us daddy for today. Thank you all.